right, it is time to come back and get on to our next presentation. So up next, this page, we have Sarah Cornell returning to the stage, and she'll be talking about using reports for acquisition workflows and fund allocations.
Okay, so can you hear me okay with
this? Yes.
Okay. Yes, you can all hear me like this. Does this work? Great, stage. Okay, so I'm really glad to follow David's presentation because some of mine that's actually is heavily affected by the future of acquisitions, so acquisitions 2.0, but also any integration with the ERM. So the way that I'm going to approach my presentation today is to show you, to help people level up from one level of SQL to another. That's one, because it is purely about reports. It is purely about acquisitions reports. Because acquisitions does not have the luxury of the beloved item search. There is an order search, there is an invoice search, but nothing quite so good. And I'm also not a big fan of the order search. So there are tools in the acquisitions module where you can supposedly pull information out, but they're pretty, they're pretty one-note tools. You can look up orders within a range. And also the date thing bugs the living crap out of me, sorry. So the fact that the dates are a little funky in the order search. So what I did was I used our idiosyncratic, local to our history, local to one of the presentations earlier this week talked about how your legacy system sometimes does carry over to how you do things in your new system. So it's very idiosyncratic, but what I really think is that because everything is so modular, especially SQL, you can use things, and I'm gonna make sure they're pointed out really well, to grab them from what I use and hopefully maybe use the whole report, yay, but also use maybe the values behind the report. To use them for what you need to, and also to help people who have the cut and paste report knowledge. Like I was talking about it yesterday when I was presenting with Andrew, a lot of how I feel right now is that I'm seeing a lot of people in the community who have enough to cut and paste a report, and they're like, woohoo, and that feels really good. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you to actually say okay, and then this is what you're gonna edit. And to how to visually hone in on those little things where you can get just level up just a little bit. Not that you have to, but that you can. The other thing that I find really important is because I am the head of a tech services department, I also apparently get to set the culture. It's really weird. And I have a very small team. I work with 2 full-timers and 2 page part-timers. And all of whom have had no turnover, knock on wood, in a zillion and a half years. So we have this really strong culture that is built on trust and high quality, high expectations of ourselves and other people. But it also means that the tools that I can build as a manager, that the SQL, believe it or not, is part of that scaffolding. So if part of your values or for your department is to be super accurate, then you expect people to check their work. If you expect people to check their work, someone in Round Rock actually mentioned that their cataloging department, somebody else checks it after they catalog an item. And I was like, wow, that's an investment in time. So my job is also to provide the tools to help them follow my expectations. And that goes for myself as well. So when I input manually because we don't use EDVAC or any batch order or batch invoice entry. When I manually input invoices, if I make a typo, I am totally messing my own self up. And if my acquisitions person types in a super long B&T invoice number wrong, and we want to know which invoice it was paid on, we just shot ourselves in the foot. So I said, okay, you need to check your work. Then that also means I have to provide a tool to do that. So this is, the structure of this presentation is also going to go from simple, supposedly, to much, much more complicated, even verging on proof of concept. So the first one is just list of invoices paid on a date to a vendor. And just the way that I talk to myself in the reports module is that if there is a runtime variable, I put it in square brackets in the name. So invoices paid on date to vendor. So I know that those are the variables that I'm gonna have to put in. If I needed a different report that was just a static thing with no variables whatsoever, then what I would do is I would just say invoices paid on, in last week.
Adjust your shares.
Okay, so does it look funny?
It's showing your speaker notes.
Oh, I am?
Speaker view.
Oh, online.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Don't mind us.
Okay, sorry. And this is where it comes down to legacy ILS practices. In Millennium, our legacy ILS in 2016 or 17 when we closed it down, after we input a batch of invoices, I would look at a page that said, this is what, when you post it, you got a report. And I said, I want that report back because it was something that I needed for structure to carry me over during that transition. So this super simple report, which is not super simple, unfortunately, because it's acquisitions, has exactly the same columns. I don't need all the columns that I used to. Oh. I'm totally looking at my next slide and you guys are like a whole slide behind me. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead because I think I said all that. Okay, so invoices paid on date to vendor. Okay, so the runtime variables are at the top. So I enter the date that the invoice was closed and a part of the vendor name, or you can leave it blank because there's a wild card in the SQL. And the report results are at the bottom where it's just invoices paid on whatever date I created the slide. On 7/20, and it has exactly the same columns that it did in Millennium. I don't use the invoice ID anymore because it turned out in Koha we didn't really need to track that, like how it was actually paid in there. But what we did need is I always have to double check that I paid it on the right vendor. That I typed in the invoice ID correctly or the invoice number correctly, especially if I'm being silly and actually typing in the entire Amazon order. I don't know why I still do that. It's been a long time. And it also lists it totals up the invoice. So if I want my staff to check their work, I say, and run this report after every batch. And I do the same. So go back and check. So, oh good, you were following along just fine. Okay. So that and for each of these reports, I'm gonna have just a little bit of like the SQL concepts that are gonna be covered, even if I don't say them out loud. That's kind of why I picked this report to show you guys. I need to know how to look over here. Okay, so under the hood, this is what it looks like. The center, I'm so proud of it that Kelly liked my boxed in things. I was like, phew, tomorrow's presentation is heavily based on these little green boxes. So the center of a sort of complicated SQL report. When somebody says, oh, it's just some nested queries, and your brain explodes and you go like, okay, yeah, maybe, sure, fine, whatever. So it starts in the middle. And so this is where you gather up all of the basic data that you're going to need to maybe calculate on later. And that is called subquery one, so sub one. And then, okay, so then next level up, it gathers all the basic, this one is the one where it casts the order total as a decimal. This is a money thing, and now I don't remember whether it right justified or not. Should I go back and make this right justified, or does that make you for fun? This is the report I was thinking about. I was like, oh, I should fix that. It would be fun. Should learn how to do that. So the second level of the SQL is doing like a first level of calculation or a second level of calculation, so it can gather it all together, and that's called sub two. Just making sure. There you go. And this is where it adds the runtime parameters. So, and then the very, very top. So the very, very top is where it adds the runtime parameters. And that's where you set the final columns that are going to show up in your final report. They are, as you notice, it's because you gave it an alias in one of your subqueries, then your table name is now sub2. Okay? So that's the logic that we're following. This also shows that you can, now you're also casting again as a decimal with so it has 2 digits after the decimal, also has 18 digits before the decimal. That's apparently standard but unnecessary. So the thing that you'll notice is that I am pulling from, I'm going to go back to some over here. I'm pulling from, so I wanted to know which orders I paid today. I wanted to know which invoices I paid today. It's not that simple. So I want to look at the invoices, but if I just looked at the invoices, I wouldn't have the shipment costs. So anytime you want to know the total of an invoice, you have to bring in how much Koha then assigned to shipment. And this kind of makes sense as a person who actually inputs invoices. You think, okay, there was an extra little field that said shipment costs, so I'm not totally surprised that it lives in a different place. But then when you first, if you were writing this yourself from scratch, which you would never do, but if you were looking at something super simple, you'd think, oh, well, why doesn't it match? That must be my fault. That's because of Koha. And it would be really nice if it was as simple as the items table and the biblios table. I know not even those are that simple, but there are a lot of tables in acquisitions. That doesn't mean that it's not usable. It just means that you just have to be a little more careful when you're putting together your SQL. Definitely doesn't put it off the table. It just makes it just a little bit more like, okay, now I need to make sure I actually proofread this to make sure it's getting the whole shebang. When you actually, like if you were trying to get like a basic sense of what you wanted and where to get it from the database, somebody mentioned a couple of days ago that they look at, they will run a report that says select asterisk to find out everything that's in that particular table. So if I knew that I wanted to use the ACK invoices table, I could run a report that said select asterisk invoices from invoices, and then find out what's in there. But you could also go to the database schema. Who uses the database schema? Yay! Do you use it for acquisitions when you're doing stuff like this? Okay, there you go. So highly recommended. One thing that I thought I might mention earlier, but forgot, of course, There are about 24 reports in the SQL wiki in the acquisitions section. I'm pretty sure this one's there. This is probably where it came from originally until I customized it for us. But those two places, when you're trying to just get your bearings and say, what's my question? What am I actually asking of my database? Those are two great places to start. In addition to that, run a report and figure out what all tables you can look at. And what does it look like for one record? Okay, so we go back to this. I forgot why I was going to show you this again. Okay, so again, after you see all that SQL, you see now you know where those runtime variables came from, and you see where you would say like, okay, wait, now it's 7 years on. It turns out I don't really need the invoice ID because we don't really track it back to that. So I could remove that. So now you would know, just like, okay, I'll delete that. I'll clean that out. That doesn't work for my library. Or if you say like, I don't actually need to know that the shipping cost is always 0. Or like, I just want to see it in the total, you would know. You just didn't need to display that at the top level. You could actually just hide that. It still needs it for the calculation, but you just don't have to show it at the top level. And you could also, thing we learned yesterday about accessibility, and this, I was wondering if it was like this on this report, where it says view invoice, view. A screen reader would go bluey on this. And so I might actually switch it back over to put the link on the invoice number instead of having a separate column. Does anybody have any questions about this one? It's like specifically, you don't have to, if you don't want to. That's fine.
Well, Ms. Cassidy, did you share your reports on Anna?
I have it set to do that. I don't know, like, I don't have to do anything special to it.
If you're sharing, I think
Yeah, like that's just a little checkbox, right? Checkbox. I checked that box off like super early and that was available. So yeah. They will also be, there's a link on my last slide. I'll make sure I show that QR code because I forgot to put in the actual URL on the slide too, but I'll give you a chance to go to that. I plopped them into my Google Drive just because that was the easiest place for me to put them. So, okay, so electronic resources and micromedia renewals, and no, I don't have to skip this part just because somebody just talked about it. It actually makes it slightly, so this is more complicated, and the scenario that this answers, so the kind of research question that this answers is that I need a one-stop shop where I can say to my boss, yes, we've paid that. No, we haven't. Or I can say, yes, we have all those EXCOs to pay. We have a handful of renewals that are on separate invoices, but they're all going to come up at, because our fiscal year is July to June. So in April, she asks me what I have left, and I say, we have this, 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 and this. I've been typing those. Speaking of legacy, my predecessor, who retired in 2012, had an Excel spreadsheet. And until I created this report, because I was just I love Excel, and I was so sick of the double data entry, because there was a pivot table, and I wanted the pivot table. I was so sick of the double data entry that I was like, I just want to see if I can do it. I just want to see if I can make a SQL report do this thing, because it is and again, we're going back to department values. I want one-click report. I want to be able to hand it to my boss and say, okay, if I'm on vacation, you can tell what we haven't paid yet. And when I've already done the data entry, you can run this report. It's linked on the front page of our reports homepage. You can go there. As long as she remembers that it's there and which one it is, we're good. Otherwise, she says, hey, tell me, and I can print it off, or I could double check the Excel spreadsheet and make sure I haven't lied to myself. And it also does some thinking the way that acquisitions and renewals people do their thinking that Koha currently can't do without some bashing over the head. So on the homepage of the acquisitions homepage, you can see what's been paid on a fund, right? So if you see what's been paid on a fund, that assumes A, that they're all on the same fund. Otherwise, you have to click around. Or that they've all been paid in this fiscal year, or that you didn't cancel anything from last year. So I want to see a master list of my electronic resources. I'm so sorry about the micromedia thing. I just remembered it. So micromedia, remember when micro really meant like mini print, like a New York Times mini print thing? Like, I've just kept the terminology. So micromedia really meant like microfilm, microfiche, and the New York Times microprint index. Isn't that awesome? I just realized they've been staring at a screen that's like, micromedia, what's that? It's just electronic resources. And now, after we canceled one microfilm subscription, okay? So it assumes that, so just looking to see what's already built into Koha, all you can see is one phone at a time. You also can't say, okay, like my research question, you can't say, okay, so now I know what's missing. All it can tell you is what you have paid. So I'm on a list that says you've paid this, and this, and not that. That's all I want, okay? There's a lot of logic behind that, but all I want to know sounds pretty simple. You don't just have to use it for my adorable micromedia. You could use it for any sort of set of things that are annually renewed. So you need museum passes. Northeast uses a lot of museum passes. Somebody brought up state park passes, anything like that that is annually renewed. You could use it for print subscriptions, but I think your brain might explode. There you go. Again, lots of SQL concepts this is going to cover. This uses 8 different tables. You can tell SQL to act like the data is named something other than what it is by using a case when. And you can also, because when it gets complicated, and especially during that case when thing, you can use the common characters to hide commas to tell you or future person who replaces you what crazy stuff you were thinking that day. Also, it can just say when you've hard coded something, what to do next. Like next year, change this to next year's fiscal year dates. You could put that in the SQL notes, but because you lose those when you run it, or actually, no, you don't anymore, but you used to lose those when you ran it, that they just aren't quite as useful. So leave yourself notes. And, oops. When I was talking about like, what have we paid? Like, what have we paid now? The key way to achieve that is max date in SQL. There are, for things that you pay monthly, like we pay our Canopy and Hoopla monthly. That does, unfortunately, it doesn't total up what we paid for Hoopla through the year, which is better because then I'd have a heart attack every day. But it grabs that last invoice. Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is one click, there's no variables. It grabs and it links to the titles as opposed to view last payment or something like that. So it links to the titles, tells you the vendor, links to the invoice. So you can actually click straight through, knowing how to create a link to an item or a bid stopped being important because they have the data links and reports for those, but they do not have them for acquisitions. So still knowing how to create a link is super useful. The last paid in fiscal year. So when did I last pay the RB Digital Unlimited? why is it even still on the list? It's because our state library took it over in 2001 and I don't want to remove it from my list until, like, just in case they stop paying. Because like for a while there, we were still using ARPA money. I want it on my list. I think it was one of the same way that David was, which is like, I cut some things I want to see. Like I want it in my map for this research question, this office research question, okay? Also, it links to what budget account. So this column is actually using a manually case when. It's if it says this number, for a while there, I wanted to link it in the translation to the description, and I was like, brain, just no. I was like, Sarah, there's 3 of them. Just type it in. Hard coding is okay sometimes. Sometimes. Like I know this isn't going to change until I change it. So I'm good there. Okay. And then I love the fact that I could bring in the order notes, I brought in the item notes, I brought in the basket notes, because we talk to ourselves, my acquisitions person especially, and I talk to ourselves differently in the item record versus in the order record. What time do I have here? It tells you the time, just technical note. So what I'm hoping, now that you see this, is that the earn will work kind of like this. That's what I'm really, really hoping. Where it will grab everything you care about. It will show you what you last paid for. Maybe it would even total up what you paid to your monthly payments all to one particular vendor. That would be awesome. If this was my acquisitions page, like the acquisitions link in the ERM, I would be a happy camper. I would be fine. The reason it looks like this is because this is literally what I want in my Excel spreadsheet. So this again was a transition for me. I'm honestly the only person using it right now, but for me, this was the transition moment where I needed just that little bit of back, like sameness, and then I'll use it, and then I can double check it for a couple of years. I've actually had it for a couple of years. It's useful, mostly for on the fly. So, comparing to what you see from the fund specific spent page. So it's like, yeah, it's good. I mean, it's not bad, but it doesn't tell me I can't see multiple funds. And I also can't see across fiscal years. It can only show me what is paid in this fiscal year. Okay, so this is, I think this is all the code. Yeah, this is all the code. I told myself that I would go slower than I did yesterday because I was so giggly yesterday. But apparently slower means really, really slow. Okay, so there's only one nested query in here, and I actually commented out a huge, you see in the green box, rates. You see in the green box where it actually puts like, I have a list of this very specific list. At first I thought, I wanted to get SQL to use a query to find all of the things I cared about. And then I realized that the only way to only list what I cared about was to put in their bit numbers, because those again aren't going to change. So, unless I change them. So I use the notes, made myself a note saying this means this means that, because leaving just the number in there, future you is going to think you're totally just having a day. Right? Leave yourself breadcrumbs. There you go. And then the rest of you see there's like left join, left join, left join, left join, left join, left join, left. Isn't that awesome? Look at that. ACK orders, ACK budgets, biblio, ACK invoices, ACK booksellers, ACK budget periods, items, ACK basket. There you go. So you'll see up in the top section where I did a case when, where if it's a budget code, I just needed it to say micromedia, books and media, or periodicals. I just needed it to say that. Hard coding every once in a while is a very good thing. I think that's all. Okay. So then, stepping it up yet again, what other questions do you have when you're trying to run a department and make your boss happy, who also really loves data? I don't know why I'm referring to this so much, but my boss is such a data nerd that sometimes we have to like just step away and go into separate rooms and just stop, because it's just not safe for anybody else. And sometimes she just lets me do crazy stuff like this. So we use Collection HQ. Does anybody else use Collection HQ? Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. So Collection HQ is awesome. Our fund structure does not exactly match our item location structure. And Collection HQ is an awesome product that tries to do exactly this. Use circulation statistics and expenditures from previous fiscal years to inform your fund allocations. But because of the way that I built our CHQ data, I couldn't use it for allocations. It was much more important for my selectors to actually know the data. It's a little bit esoteric, but when they give you different data for, say, audiobooks than they do for books, if you call them media or non-book. So because I wanted one set of users to be able to see a particular style of data, it meant I totally shot myself in the foot and couldn't do this. And I think there might be something in the works about connecting CHQ and koha, but that's not official. I don't know. I think they're just exploring some connections. So yay, I love the fact that they're talking to each other. I love the fact that they're talking to each other, because it means this crazy idea of Sarah's might actually come to fruition. This is a little bit of a proof of concept too. So again, so you don't have to enter everything into Excel. One of the things we've had for several years is just annual search statistics works the way we needed to. We had some fancy pants stuff in there. And I was just a report, and I was like, well, if I use that as the basis, and then I add on some expenditures and some math, and then stole it from Andrew, the way that it's this report, I'm pretty sure it's this report, where it actually, sorry, where it displays the same way as the fund expenditure page that you just saw. And so the magic that it does is it all makes sense if you have exactly this research question, right? But I actually think that you don't need to have exactly the same research question, because we all want to know this. Like, we all want to know this. It's just a question of how your funds are structured. Whether or not your funds and your locations are one and the same, ours are not. Luckily, there is a way to do a crosswalk. Luckily, it is a many-to-one crosswalk. If I needed to do a many-to-many crosswalk, I probably do have a many-to-many crosswalk. I just totally stuck my head in the sand and said, they don't need to know. Okay. Oh, there are also a couple of really cool things. Something like just things they're learning in the last year. I'm just super proud of being able to display in the column heading what you put in for the variable. I think that's awesome. More people should be able to do that. So that's one thing I think is really cool. If you are creating variables or customizing something for your library and you're adding, you're saying you're adding multiple or using variables multiple times, keep in mind you will use it both times, but the text in the variable has to match exactly. Okay, and again, sometimes you just have to hard code something. Okay, so the runtime variables for this report are kind of bonkers. I don't want them to be like this. In fact, I would actually really like Koha to be able to do this for me. I really would love this to be part of the, say, homepage of the acquisitions module, where it asks, instead of asking you how you are helping you budget, I think it spreads it out over 12 months. I think there's that. Instead of doing that, I wish it would do that. It did this. So what you can do, and these are just our raw fund codes. It was the way for me to like not confuse myself. Because if I keep them in the raw codes, I don't accidentally mix anything up. So putting in a total amount to allocate, and then each of the manual funds. Obviously, if you just had two, that'd be yay. I would love to have just two. A lot of our continuations, they don't rely on circulation statistics. So this is basically a list of all of the funds that they don't really match up to any circulating location. Make sense? And there are things like reference continuations, adult electronic content, which is where we put things we buy for our Kindles. Oh, and our Overdrive Advantage files, so things like that. And then the youth versions of those. This is what it looks like. Once I've actually typed in those runtime variables, it puts the 130,000 in green up top. Oh, you can't see the green really, but anyway, it's up there. I'm very proud of it. And it also puts in everything that was a variable that you typed in. It makes that green, and then it does the math. So you can see, oh yeah, this is report, good. I seriously was starting to think I was hallucinating this. So this is the report where you see amount allocated, ordered, spent, and ordered plus spent, and then total available. That's the acquisitions homepage, right? And then the next two columns are brought in from our location-based circulation statistics, that report that I already had. And then what the SQL does is it takes that 130, it subtracts all of the things you typed in, then it goes and it finds the total circulation, and it finds the percentage of the total circulation for each of these funds. And then it does the math, and then you're very tired and you have to take a week off. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice? Like just a little screen that page, acquisition something. I was so sad you were gone because you didn't get to see my pitch. So wouldn't it be great though, because this is cost per use.
Yeah.
I think this is projection based on cost per use. Yeah, if I ever need to ask for clapping, this was the place to go. So this time I gave you all the line numbers because it's a super long report. At the top, this is what you see, okay? So anybody who's really didn't feel confident in SQL before, are you able to follow these little breadcrumbs that I'm leaving in? Good. Just not fun. I'll ask for claps and nods. So this is where you decide what actually shows up in your final report. This is where it starts doing, it calculates the copy of acquisitions home screen, in which you must account for not just shipping, but adjustments. So in the invoices, you just needed, well, I suppose you actually do technically need to account for adjustments, but we tend not to at that point. So here, in order to get the numbers to exactly match, it has to account for both the shipping and the adjustments, and both of those are in subqueries. And then, second page. Go back, make sure I know what I'm looking at. So the second page is showing you my part of my, or sorry, this is the subquery where it asks for the variables. Again, I could only do a few, do a whole lot more. And then the second part shows the tail end of the money query, which feeds directly into those top level calculations. Again, you saw where if you assign an alias to a subquery, then you get to use it above. And then the next query brings in the location equivalents to the funds and continues on to the next slide. So this part down here is the very beginning of that crosswalk from my locations to my funds. It has a zillion and a half. I think it's like 100, I think. Can't quite remember. There's so many.
Wow.
Okay, the bottom part isn't the interesting part. The part at the top, not yet, not yet. So that top part where I said I snipped all but 2 entries in a very long list of item locations corresponding to fund codes, I already had that crosswalk. I mean, because my previous director had a pivot table because he wanted this and we did it in Access, right? So I already had that crosswalk. In fact, I kind of already had that crosswalk because of CHQ. So I was already, business reasons already thinking about what gets paid on what and what lands where. You probably, if you have a even vaguely similar funding structure where it's not just books, media, whatever, you probably have that crosswalk in your catalogers' heads. Because if it was paid on, then it usually goes to. You probably already know this, okay? It's just a question of writing it down and then typing it out. Actually, I probably used some Excel and some concatenate and then some copy pasting. So let's see, we've got the fund code in there. Okay. And as I said before, it can only be many to one or just I'm pretty sure it would like double use numbers and your totals wouldn't total up. Okay, so then this subquery totals the circulation in the date range, totals the circulation in the date range, and it calculates each fund's percentage of the total. It calls on, these two call on the same in statement. So again, this is hard coded. So there's an in statement where it says in PDNB, in PDB, in PDL. Can you tell our library starts with P? So all of those are the ones that should get their data brought into the report. I think I actually say in my last slide that I'm kind of irked. I don't know why, and I'm still kind of irked that I have to type this in twice. There was a certain point where, yes, there did just need to take a day off and say, like, okay, you know what, let's just not. Oh, so the second one that's highlighted right now, actually does the denominator of those calculations for percentage. So the bottom one does the denominator, the top one does the numerator. And the last one is the tail end of one of the higher level queries. So you see that it's that first one really gave you that structure of, okay, subquery, then you do something to it. And then maybe you do something in addition at another level. Right? So that's what goes into this. Is it worth it? Yeah, but it's worth it once a year. We happen to do, like I said, our fiscal year is July to June. Our budget cycle essentially starts in January. My boss makes a proposal for the materials budget, because this again is just the materials. This is even just books and media. This isn't micromedia. This is only the things that we use CERT data to allocate. The way that we knew that this was successful was unfortunately very pedestrian. It gave pretty much the same numbers as the previous year's Excel spreadsheet, which was pretty much the same numbers as we already had allocated, because when you post fiscal years, you can copy them over, and it's actually easiest to copy over your previous year's allocations because then you can just edit them. It was pretty much the same. So it was very anticlimactic. However, it was data-driven decision-making, and it meant that it was set up for next fiscal year, where I could leave a note saying, do this, change this. And then next year in January, when my boss wants to know, like, okay, how are we doing? I can run a report, just thunk. And there you go. And it's very reassuring because I don't have to keep doing that intellectual work. As much, even for people who really enjoy Excel, I would guess that one of the most annoying things is that you have, when you do something once a year, you have to relearn it every year. And it's not that easy to leave yourself notes in Excel. I've gotten pretty good at leaving myself directions, but that's because I got burned, right? Like, you don't have to get burned. Wouldn't it be nice if Koha could just say, like, okay, some people think in terms of how much money should I spend every month? Yes. Well, there's a whole bunch of people also making decisions based on circulation data from previous fiscal years. Oh, there you go. I mean, I know that's way more complicated under the hood, but that's how we're thinking, right? Okay. Phew. And I think my favorite point of the slide is to say, wouldn't it be nice if there was just a little thing right there? I think that was my point. Okay, so outstanding problems. A case when crosswalk is a blunt instrument. Yeah. You can't adjust your proposed allocations without entering them all over again. Wouldn't it be nice if you were just in a live spreadsheet or a live web page? I was thinking, like, maybe we could do a page. Like, if you were in a live page where you could say, oh no, actually, let's just round that down, round that up, or say, oh wait, they're not even using that location anymore. So no more. Even if the way that it's built right now, even if you just want to carry over the last year's spend, you have to enter it in manually in those runtime variables. And here you go. I don't understand why I'm kind of peeved that. The statistics location data has to be included twice because proofreading is, I just copy and pasted. Anytime I needed to change anything, I couldn't deal with that particular, variable in my head going awry. And also, I'm pretty impressed that I remembered as much about this as I did because I built it back in January. It's super complicated. And I also think that it's a bit like the pages. Like, it's nice to know you can do something so complicated if you are so inspired. I kind of wonder if we have to. Like, why? Okay. So the SQL reports from the presentation, at the top, should have put in the plain text URL, I'm sorry about that. And then the acquisition section on the reports wiki, because I figured now you're thinking, what else is there? Thank you.
That was the one comment online is, are all of these reports that you showed, are they on the wiki?
They're not on the wiki. I'm happy to.
They can't hear you online.
Sorry, they're not on the wiki. They can be on the wiki. I think my goal for this is to just make sure that they were in a place. They will shortly be on the wiki. If y'all want them there, I'll put them there.
Okay, there aren't going to be any other comments online because apparently the power strip I'm plugged into isn't working and my battery just died. So if anybody else is watching the YouTube feed, if there are any more comments, I'm not the person today.
Thank you for your service.
There's just one
Yeah.
The only other comments online are from Laurel, who says, "You have inspired me."
Aw.
And Christine Lee is thanking you. So good feedback on this.
Yeah, that was the issue. Like, I know it was kind of, I know it's a wall of text. I know it's a lot of information. I can't believe I talked for 45 minutes straight. So that I actually don't really want to apologize for that. Yeah. Serious questions? I don't know where the pictures are from.
They're all like, where are the pictures from?
Oh, you know, I think. I was like, oh, don't ask me. So our library's, online historical archive, or, you know, we have a, oh, you guys know what I mean. Anyway, so those are, we have some local, postcards. So I don't, why, what is that? What is it like? It's okay as well, but it looks like this weapon of war. And so like, and yeah, the first one was from NASA. Yeah.
I didn't actually have a question. My comment was just gonna be, this makes me appreciate not having to deal with the acquisition tables. And if I am a wizard, you're like wizard supreme. Like, acquisition table.
Trust me, I've probably stolen some of your stuff too. Like the provenance, I feel like you can also use those comments for like provenance of your sequel. Like that was definitely Andrew's first half of that. That was definitely and anybody who just has always, you know, maybe wanted to like be able to manipulate the homepage of of a fund or the acquisitions homepage, being able to copy that in SQL and be able to change the columns, because the acquisitions module is like, it kind of lags behind in things that are linked, right? Like things that are adjusted, maybe the tables are get done later. So kind of bootstrap it, I guess.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.